Hello, everybody. It's Jackie Martin here from Be More Learning. So excited to have another pop-up positivity. And today I'm excited to have Adam Blackwell. He's our guest today. And Adam is a special friend of mine. I've known him since he was like in middle school, I think, Adam. He and Adam's mom and I are best friends. But he has such an amazing story to tell and something he's going to share with us that he does on a regular basis that I thought you would be super interested in. And so before we get started with all that, Adam, tell us a little bit about what it is that you've been up to. What are you doing right now? Because he's Adam Blackwell, but he's become a modern day blacksmith, right? Something like that. Tell us more about it, Adam.
Yep, absolutely. I call myself an ornamental iron worker. We make really fancy things for really rich people. That's iron railings, trellises, just really cool, ornate things and super custom and really interesting stuff like that.
Nice. And so I understand you work for it's Calhoun Metalworks, right, in the city?
Correct. Yeah, that's us, and we do tons of work all over the state and country. And this is the first time I've ever had any sort of job working with my hands. I was a real estate agent before, and it's really exciting work, really interesting, something I can be with.
Oh, well, so that whole work with your hands thing, and that's what makes what we're going to talk about so interesting, I think, is because, to me, you're like the quintessential He-Man kind of, work with your hands, you got that great beard, all that kind of stuff. And today we're actually talking about, of course, this is pop-up positivity. And one of the ways I know you and I have talked about that you are helping to deal with the stress and the sort of the negative stuff that comes along is you've taken up meditation. Is that right? Tell
Yep.
me how all that happened.
Yep, absolutely. About 2.5 years ago, like I said, I was a real estate agent. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. I didn't ever see myself working at a desk or selling things or working for my dad's company. And I was really kind of sad with my life. I was just kind of numb to everything going on. And I just was searching for an answer, and I ended up coming across a book. It's called 10% Happier. And I didn't even read the book. I just thought the name of the title was, hey, I could go for that. And it was about mindfulness meditation. And I just took off to it. From the first time that I meditated, I watched a 20-minute YouTube video and I just latched on. I did it every single day. And it's really, I can't even explain how much it's changed my life.
Wow. Okay, so you've been doing it a little while now. And
Correct. Yeah.
every day?
Yeah, it's about 2.5 years now. I was really every single day about it for about the first, I think, 650 days. I never missed a day.
Wow.
But it's actually kind of nice now that I've missed a day because it's relaxed my practice. It's not something that I feel like I have to do. I don't get out of bed to do it anymore. It's just something that I do that makes me feel better than I do every day. So.
So before you kind of tell us what that all might look like or how you do it, tell me what it is you feel like. You said it changed your mind, it changed your life, and you called
Right.
it mindfulness meditation. So tell us a little bit about what it's done for you.
Right, absolutely. My biggest issue is my whole life, I always wanted to be somewhere else. When I was in middle school, I couldn't wait to get to high school. When I was in high school, I couldn't wait to college. And in college, I couldn't wait for this real life thing. And I just was never fully where I was at. And, I was always trying to look at the next step, figure everything out. And the meditation has just made me be able to appreciate where I actually am, everything that's going on. Mindfulness is the big buzzword for it now. And just paying more attention to your own life makes it infinitely more interesting. And it's just completely changed my mind and made my head a better place to be.
Mm.
My internal narrator is a lot nicer now.
Oh yeah. Oh boy, that internal dialogue, man. Don't you find, I mean, it may be in the past for you, we say things to ourselves we would never say to somebody else.
Right, absolutely. And in my head especially, I feel like I was very chaotic and just very to the point and kind of mean. And it's separated me from those thoughts. The first time I meditated, it was jarring to see how many thoughts were going through my mind and how I couldn't pay attention to my breath for even a few seconds. And it's just one of those things. I think it's why I realized, hey, this is going to be good for me. And like you said, I don't look like a meditator, but I think the people who are super adverse to this kind of hippie stuff and I think they're the people that benefit the most from it, because normally they're the ones that have the worst storms in their heads. Just from what I've seen.
Well, and so what's interesting that you bring up the storms in your heads, because I think that's maybe a lot of people don't call it that, but when they stop and pause, and maybe what we're experiencing right now is causing people to actually pause long enough to go, wait, there is too much going on up here. That's not right. And that's what helps them to see that there's something positive to be gained by meditation, right? So you said it
Right,
was jarring
absolutely.
for you, huh?
Right. And one of my favorite quotes about meditation, I've never seen it attributed to anyone, but it's, you can't control the waves, but you can learn how to surf. And that's really what meditation is I still have those thoughts. It's still chaos in my brain. I'm just not encumbered. I don't feel, I'm not taken away with them, but they're definitely still there. It's definitely still chaotic in my head. But you just have a completely different relationship to, oh, it's not that my mind's going insane. It's just, oh, it's kind of loud in here today.
Yeah.
Uh,
But do you feel like it starts with awareness? I mean, and maybe is it the getting quiet that helps you to become aware of all of that that's going on up there?
right, absolutely. And the practice really is, it's just bringing your attention back to your breath over and over and over again. But what's interesting is once you've been doing it a while, you can bring your attention to whatever it is. You can bring attention to an itch in your arm. You can bring attention to the task you're doing. It just helps you focus. And when we actually meditate, all we're doing is practicing bringing yourself back, because your mind, it loves to run wild, wonder what's for lunch or anything. Um, and the practice is just over and over again, getting back to your breath, getting centered, if you want to call it that.
Hmm.
And that brings all the changes. That's all there is to it.
So wait a minute. Okay. Now, most people have this vision who aren't familiar with meditation, who have this vision of what meditation is. And I think, I'm just guessing, but I'm thinking many of them think you're like in this quiet room and there's, hum, and you're sitting cross-legged and it has to be all of that. Is that right? Or am I off base? And what is it? Like, how do we start this whole thing?
It can be. That's the most interesting thing about meditation. There are literally thousands of different practices that you can get into. If you want it to be a super spiritual kind of hippie thing, it can be that, or it can just be a practice that helps bring some, you know, uh, peace, calmness to your life that we could definitely all use nowadays.
Yes.
And but I did, when I first started, I went through a sort of spiritual, if you want to call it that, part, but now it really is, it's like my morning coffee. It's just something I do. It helps. I have no question that it continually helps me. I'm getting better. But
So any time of day, is there a particular, I mean, do you pick a particular time or do you kind of do it throughout the day?
I do it in the morning. I got to work early every day for the first year and a half, and I just meditate in my truck 20 minutes before work. I was always 100% sure I was going to be on time, and it was weird. I've had to tell all my coworkers and stuff. It was kind of weird to talk about, but and just be like, hey, it's what I do. But it's one of those things I like in the morning, but you can do it at any time. It's just making it a habit. The biggest thing about meditation is you can't meditate once or twice and go, hey, this isn't working for me. Where's the results? Really, you don't see many results until about 15 to 20 days. And then within a month or two, you really go, wow, this is different. But that's the hardest thing about meditation is for the first little bit, you have to take it on faith that this is working for me. And that's the time it's kind of the hardest to do.
Hmm. Because part of this is breaking old habits, right? Letting go
Correct.
of sort of the chaos in your head or even in your body. I mean, I know sitting still, and maybe people are going through it right now when they're being forced to be indoors and to sit still, and that's even difficult to do. Tell us how you would start. How does one begin this whole thing?
Biggest thing is just to sit down and go to your breath. As long as you can breathe in and breathe out, you can meditate. I like, they say you should straighten your spine, but a lot of people get caught up in the postures and all of that. Biggest thing is to be sitting and to have something that works for you. And so, you can kind of squeeze in between your shoulders, and that kind of lets you sit up straight. And I like
Mhm.
to bring my shoulders up and then let them down, and that just kind of relaxes. You bring up a little bit. If you want to sit against your chair because it's uncomfortable to sit up, you can do that, but most people would kind of take a posture like that. And I do my hands, I just lay them one on top of the other. I don't do anything spectacular. People do different stuff, but that just feels comfortable and natural and not too uh, crazy to me.
Yeah. Well, because some people show their anxiety or stress in their hands, like they can't hold them still. So I guess that position just helps you kind of hold yourself still. Yeah.
Right.
Is
And
it about stillness?
it's about accepting what's going on. That's the biggest thing is no matter what's going on, no matter where your brain goes, is you always have that to bring back to your breath. That you are in your seat and staying there. That's all there is to it. If you like where your thoughts are going, you can stay with them, but having that, bringing it back every time, that's the whole point of the practice. It's almost like a mental bicep curl for your brain. Every
Hmm.
time you go, hey, my mind's just doing something else. Every time you bring it back, that's what the point is. And that's what's hard to learn because that's the frustrating part. And that's when you start to be mean. That internal narrator starts to be like, hey, why can't you do this? Why can't you pay attention? All that.
So even
But
that internal critic is criticizing the way you're trying to meditate. Is that what you're saying?
right, absolutely.
Okay.
I've heard it described before as being trapped in a phone booth with a psychopath.
Oh.
Is what being in your head. That kind of, you're trapped with that internal narrator and learning that relationship that they're just thoughts. That's what the practice is.
Yes. So do you find that it gets, I'm like, if you did this every day, you probably would do it for how long? Especially in the
Uh,
beginning,
20 minutes.
20
In the
minutes.
beginning, it's hard to get that 20 minutes, but I think getting yourself, that's what I did. I know some people start with 5 minutes and then just kind of bring it out longer and longer. But yeah, 20 minutes is what they say. I don't even time mine anymore. I don't like, because the number one thought that I've noticed that I have is how long has it been? How long till that alarm's going to go off? And so
Hmm.
now that I've been in my practice for a while, I just sit until I'm good. And I feel like it's been about 20 minutes and I give up.
So you can feel yourself that you're relaxed and centered, and that means, okay, I'm good.
To be honest with you, usually it's that my legs have fallen asleep. That it's usually just something like that. It's just I've done this long enough for today, and like making that decision is figuring out, sensing what's in your body and seeing how it's going on, and okay, I'm ready to do whatever else is on with my day.
So music, no music, sound of any kind? Anybody have a thought on that?
You can whatever whatever works for people. I would say no music because getting it, you're able to just be with that music instead of seeing what your mind's actually doing, instead of having that silence and just seeing, oh, this is what my brain's doing, you're listening to music. But learning to bring yourself back to the music over and over again, just sitting there doing one thing, I think that's a great practice in itself, but that's not really meditation. I personally, they have some practices that are super visualization and stuff like that, and that doesn't really work for me. I like the quiet, the seeing what's going on. I like getting a break from me. Meditation really is the best part of the day for me
Mm.
because it's that break. It is that moment of, oh, I can just lay here, sit here and kind of float almost. That's the best way to
Do you ever
describe it.
fall asleep?
I don't, especially because I usually do it after my morning coffee, but it is a problem. And like, that's a lot of the straight back stuff is because some people really struggle with falling asleep while they're meditating. But for about 20 minutes, normally I'm okay. But I know some people do struggle with that. And that's why they don't recommend for beginners to do it laying down. It's because you'll end up sleeping real good. I have done it before, but it's not a regular issue.
So over time, what do you feel has been for you the biggest benefit of taking this up as a habit and a practice for you?
I think the biggest thing is that it's made my mind a better place to be. That just overall going through my day, it's not as hectic. I'm not as worn down by my thoughts, and that allows me to be so much more engaged in what I'm doing. With what I do for a living, it's almost like my job is a meditation. Just
Mm.
whatever task I have in front of me, I bring myself back to it. And it's kind of funny. Sometimes we have tons of parts to do and we'll have 100 or 200 of the same thing to do over and over again. And one day I noticed how many thoughts I was having. And that was when I realized how normally it's so quiet when I'm doing my work, is because I'm just wired it. What I've learned from my meditation has seeped into my life. Eventually it just becomes your life as a whole meditation. As silly and flowery as that sounds, it really is something that I've noticed at this point, and it's amazing.
So it's becoming who you are. It's being more in touch with who
Absolutely.
you are. Yes?
Absolutely. And it's learning to hear your own voice. It's once you're through the chaos of your brain, you learn to figure out what's actually important, what's actually worth getting worked up about or working towards, and
Mhm.
that changes everything, or at least it changed everything for me.
Well,
Um,
in this day and age, and one of the reasons we still want you to come and share with our students with Be More is to be able to share something. I think this is so practical, and it gives people an opportunity to have something they can do about the stress and anxiety there's stress and anxiety going on all around us, especially right now. But I think if you add that to what's going on inside of your head, that it can get overwhelming really fast. So if there's something we can do while we can't control the outside, if we can at least find something we can do to control the inside, that can make all the
right.
difference in the world.
Right, absolutely. And that's what meditation teaches you, is it's not control. It's not forcing yourself to stay on your breath. It's about being where it's at. It's about
Mm.
flowing with it. It's about letting your thoughts come as they are and then bringing yourself back continually. And when you try to force it, when you're like, I'm not going to have a thought, that's when you're having the thought. Trying too hard is usually the problem. And it's a really interesting to see your thoughts in that way.
I love that. So what I'm taking away from this is anybody can do it. Yes.
Absolutely.
And you can start out with it's probably knowing that it's going to feel a little awkward in the beginning because your brain's you're gonna notice how chaotic it is at first. Yeah.
Right, absolutely.
Just being quiet long enough to notice. So 20 minutes, probably without music, but that's a personal preference, right? Just to
Right.
have the quiet.
I would
And you,
say at least once sit, sit for, I'd say your first time, sit for 10 minutes, set an alarm on your phone and just sit and see what happens. See if you're going crazy and you think you have to have music. But that experience for me was what made it very clear that this was something I'd benefit from. Realizing exactly how many thoughts I had and how hard it is to just sit there and go back to your breath,
mm,
back to your breath, back to your breath. It's a lot, especially when you first start. And it's really funny, you realize how mean you're being to yourself also
mm.
about not being able to do that. And just that whole relationship with yourself. Meditation is the mind observing itself. And that's the most, it's kind of who am I? How does this thing work? All that, and the effects that come from it are just. I think people get bogged down with the how much it changes, but it just makes overall your life better, and that's what I've found from it.
You've been using the term about breathing and recognizing your breathing, and I love the one of the themes we have for Be More that we were going to be doing this last time is on margin and breathing room. And that's kind of it's harkening back to that meditation is giving yourself literal breathing room.
Right, absolutely. And I've never heard this, seen this backed up before or anything, but I've heard that it's physiologically impossible to have a panic attack when your breathing's full, even, and measured. I don't know that for a fact, but it makes sense every time that I've seen someone having a panic attack, they don't have their breath, and having that breath control. And
Mm.
it's almost something that's not conscious anymore. I found myself in a situation where I was getting really agitated and I felt the back of my neck getting hot. It was just a really interesting thing. And I was like, hey, that's my adrenaline going on. I'm getting agitated. I'm getting, that fight or flight is going towards fight. And just overall, it changes the whole relationship with your body.
Yeah, because you now notice the cues, and the little things that your body's telling you, I'm going there, and you're right about that. Very difficult to have a panic attack when you're, that fear, flight, or fight response you were talking about starts to get triggered. Breathing is the way to bring that under control. But what I'm
Absolutely.
hearing you say is if you've got control of your breath from the get-go, you might be less likely to go into that panic attack in the first place. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And like it's something that I found, it's not like now that I'm a meditator, I never get upset. I never have bad days or anything like that. But when I've had those freak out, oh my gosh, the world's crashing down, going to my breath, having that practice to get myself through that storm, it doesn't necessarily, I'm trying to force myself to not have those thoughts. I'm trying to feel it as much as I can feel it because that's the only way to make it pass. And I
Right.
think that's the main thing that meditation teaches you is if you have an itch, go to that itch instead of focusing on your breath. Go to that itch, watch it for long enough. If you cannot touch it, sometimes eventually you'll just end up scratching it. But if you can watch it long enough, it goes away. And that's the real, any sensation you feel, oh, this is a poke in my spine or something like that. Go to it, feel it all the way, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Mm. So that brings me back to the analogy you had about the wave and learning how to surf the wave. It isn't about trying to eliminate negative thoughts necessarily entirely because they're going to come anyway, or even circumstances like we're having to deal with. It just is, right? So the
Right.
question though is, who are you going to be when those times come along or when those thoughts come along? And what I'm hearing you say is meditation helps you be the kind of person you really want to be.
Absolutely. And like it's hard to explain why, but I feel like it helps you hear your own voice when you're not so preoccupied with all the thoughts and getting swept away with the little stuff. You can really hear your own voice and figure out what's important and the kind of life you want to live. I can't prove this anyway, but I believe I'd still be in real estate if I hadn't become a meditator. I remember the guy that got me the job, I sent him a message on Facebook and like I felt so weird. I was like, I didn't really know who he was. And I was just asking him what he did for a living. And I remember so clearly just being like, oh, that's weird. He's going to think you're a nerd, whatever. And I just, screw it. I'm going to send it. And I did that. And like, I attribute my practice to that decision. And that decision is why I have the job I have.
Mm.
And it changed everything for me.
So it gave you that extra confidence or courage, maybe even to take that. Why not just go for it? Kind of action.
Yep, absolutely.
That's wonderful. Well, I do know that people who, have different methods. Obviously, you can go full out with having, going to do meditation someplace where people do that together. But it sounds as simple as doing it right in your truck before you get out to start to work or before you would go into class. Or some people do it prayerfully. They use that as a time for, prayer and meditation. Those words are used a lot together. And I think it's important to recognize that it has to be personalized for you. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And it's one of those things. I think prayer is a very different thing. With prayer, your mind's going, you're thinking about the things you need. And to me, meditation is kind of the opposite of that. It's
Mm.
seeing what's there.
Mm.
It's a very interesting between the two of them, but they do end up getting lumped together a lot. But I think they're very different to the core of
Mm.
them.
And maybe that's like two sides of a coin, right? So one is
Right,
really where you're noticing what you need to notice inside, and then a prayer would be articulating something specific that you might need
right.
outside. I love that, Adam. I'm so excited that you were willing to share this, and I hope we get an opportunity to have you actually demonstrate it and get the kids to get a chance to experience it for themselves. But there's one question before I let you go that I ask everybody, because a life coach friend of mine, named Nina, always asks me and says, and so I'm going to ask you, is the phrase, what if it's better? I mean, I love that perspective on, even when things aren't going great, what if you look at things and say, what if it's better? So when I mention that to you, tell me what comes up for you.
Well, it's kind of funny, it's an amazing perspective to have, and I wish that's the way my mind went. But with my mind, it's always, what if it went terribly? It's kind of funny, what if it all fell apart? What's the worst case scenario? All that. That's the kind of things that my mind goes through, and that's what makes me feel secure. But what if it's better? That's such an amazing way to frame it and good way to think. And it's definitely a positive thing to introduce into your mind, but that's a very different than the way my mind works. But it's one of those things. That's one of the reasons why I think I'm going to meditate for the rest of my life, is because my mind defaults to working like that.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I know a lot of people. I know my husband Jerry's a little like that. Is that okay? So he naturally goes to, what if it's horrible, or what if it goes in that direction? But if he can come up with the answer for that, like, what's the worst case scenario? Am I okay with that, or can I survive that? He's cool with
Yeah,
where we go. Do you feel
absolutely.
the same
And
way?
it is. That's what I said. It's where I get my security, is running through this. And it is definitely a lot of mind stuff. And I don't think most people would want to think all the ways through that. But that's what makes me comfortable with my decision making, is my mind goes through all of the situations very fast. Um, and it, it, but what if it's better would definitely be a healthier, more positive way to look at life. And I'd probably be a happier person if I can look at my life that way.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's not an either or. Maybe it's either and that after you run through the scenarios on, okay, what if it goes completely south? Then maybe after you feel confident there, then you can start to explore, what if it would be better? I mean, what could happen? For
Right.
instance, my guess is you said something like that, even unconsciously, when you said, let me just go ahead and send this off to that guy.
Right. Absolutely. It was, well, it's kind of funny. Even in that, it was, what's the worst thing that could happen? And it's that somebody that I don't know thinks I'm weird, and that's what gave me the confidence to send that. So that is,
I love
but
it.
you could definitely frame it in that way as well.
Well, so what you've done actually is enlighten me, because I think it really, that everybody's wired up a little bit differently. And my guess is it's probably half and half in the world of people just saying the same thing that you just said, which is, what's the worst that could happen? And if you're okay with that, you're good. Or what if it's better and you're excited by that and you're good? I guess maybe the most important thing is to just to be aware of which way you're wired up.
Right, absolutely. And meditation's taught me so much, learning about my own brain and how I work. I didn't have any sense of that until I meditated. And it's so helpful in situations when you can be like, I'm probably not going to respond great to this, just stuff like that. It's interesting.
I love that. Well, and part of the sort of the process, I know a lot of people twice your age who don't have near the amount of self-awareness that you do. And so I applaud you for that, because I really think sort of the earlier in life we get kind of a handle on who we are, the more likely we are to be able to show up the way we want to. So way to go.
Right, absolutely. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I wish I had found it earlier than I did, to be honest. In the years of these folks, those high school, college years, those were the years I was the most preoccupied, and those were the best years I've had so far. So it's definitely an older person kind of thing, but I think it's invaluable practice to anybody who can stick with it.
Ah, awesome. Adam, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for being on Pop Up Positivity. I did want to say that you mentioned the Calhoun Design Metalworks. Is that right? The people could
Correct.
see that where? On Instagram, was it?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's Calhoun Metalworks on Instagram.
Awesome. So they can see your handiwork there.
Yep, absolutely.
Oh, wonderful. Hey, Adam, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, thank you guys for listening to another Pop-Up Positivity from Be More Learning. Looking forward to sharing with you again real soon.